Okay, so today is lesson 6.5, performing function operations and compositions. So this says simplify and state the domain. So they're saying g of x plus f of x. So here is our g of x and here is our f of x, right? So I'm going to write them down because we're going to add them together. So we have 5x to the 1/3 plus 4x to the 1/2 plus negative 3x to the 1/3 plus 4x to the 1/2. Now remember, if you this actually isn't very much work. So we've written all this out. What do these bottom numbers here represent? Do we remember? They are denominators, but good. They actually represent square roots. So this is a cubed root and this is a 2 root or a square root. So I can only add my cube roots together and I can also only add my square roots together. So 5x and negative 3x are going to end up making what? So this is going to be 2x to the 1/3. We keep that part the same. And then 4x to the 1/2 and 4x to the 1/2 will make 8x to the 1/2. Okay, so we did the first part. They asked us to simplify. So it is simplified. And then they asked us to state the domain. Okay, so on this one, my domain. Now we need to think back to roots. So remember, if there's a cubed root, your answer could be negative or positive. But if it's a square root, we can't have negatives inside because then it becomes imaginary and we're only dealing with real numbers. Well, since this has a cubed root and a square root, that means your domain is only all non-negative real numbers. So let me repeat that again. So listen. So remember that if you have an odd root, so like a 3, 5, 7, you can have positive or negative numbers. So if it was just an odd root, then you would just say all real numbers. Okay? But if you have an even root, it can only be all non-negative real numbers, because if you have an even root and you had like the square root of -4, you would end up getting an imaginary number. And we are only dealing with real numbers in this unit, no imaginary numbers. Okay? So because this one has an even root in it, that's why it's all non-negative real numbers. Can somebody repeat that back to me in your own words, what I just said? Okay. Can you say it louder? Thanks, Jet. Go ahead. No. So if you have odd numbers, it can be what? Actually, if you have just an odd, it can be all reals. Because the odd roots, if you had like -8, do you guys remember this? Like the cubed root of -8, your answer would end up being -2. Okay, because you would break down 8 to 2 times 2 times 2, right? And it'd be -2. But with an even root, you can't have a negative inside. So if it's an odd root, it can be what? Positives and negatives, which would be all reals. Okay? So odds can be all reals. Let's try this again. Odds can be all reals. But evens is going to be what? All non-negative real numbers. Because we can't have negatives. All right? Okay. Moving on. Okay, now this says g of x minus f of x. So if we go back to what our equations are that were up here at the top. I'm going to move this up though. So g of x is 5x to the 1/3 plus 4x to the 1/2 minus, and then I'm going to do f of x, my equation for f of x in parentheses, so I remember to distribute my negative through. So I have a negative 3x to the 1/3 plus 4x to the 1/2. So again, because this is subtracting, we need to remember to take that negative and distribute it to both of the f of x terms. So when I rewrite this, I get 5x to the 1/3 plus 4x to the 1/2. And then this two negatives make a positive 3x to the 1/2. And then a minus 4x to the 1/2. So when you simplify this, what do you end up getting? 8x to the 1/3. And the 4x and the negative 4x cancel out, right? You have a positive 4 and negative 4. Okay, so I've simplified. Now, what is my domain on this one? Very good. You were listening. All reals is correct because this only has a cubed root in the answer, and you can have positive and negatives if you have an odd number for your root. Okay. Do we have questions before we move on? All right, this next part has the same instructions. We just have different f of x and g of x now. So this is saying f of x times f of x. So f of x is 4x to the 2/3 times 4x to the 2/3. Who thinks they know what to do on this? Okay, well, you multiplied the two numbers in front, so 4 times 4 is 16. What do you do with your exponents when you're multiplying? Exactly, you add them. Because if you think about it, if I had x squared times x squared, what would that answer be? That would be x to the 4th. So we're going to add 2/3 plus 2/3. They already have common denominators, so what will I get? 4/3 is correct. Okay, so I've simplified. Now I need to state my domain. What is my domain on this one? All reals is correct because my root is odd, right? It's the bottom number is what tells us the root. So 3 is my root, and since it's odd, it can be all real numbers. Yes? Okay. Questions? All right, moving on to example 4. We're still using the g of x and f of x from the last example 3. It said it right above there. So if you kind of flip back and forth, g of x is 5x to the 1/2 power divided by, and f of x was 4x to the 2/3 power. Okay, so do you guys remember what you do on something like this? So there's a hint there. It says to get common denominators. You could wait, though, to get common denominators if you want to. But what's wrong with the bottom? What can we not have in the bottom of a fraction? Basically, you can't have roots, right? And this 3 represents a cubed root. So in order to get rid of that, what would I need to do? Chu Chang. 2x? So, no. But close. I mean, you're kind of thinking along the right lines. Okay, this right here really represents the cubed root of x squared. So in order to get rid of that root in the bottom, what will I need? One more x is correct. Who said that? A few of you? Okay, good. So, one more x would actually represent, if we wanted to keep them as fractions, I would just say I want to multiply by x to the 1/3. Because if you add those together, what is 2/3 plus 1/3? 3/3, which is just going to end up being, what is 3 over 3 reduced to? 1. Okay, but whatever I do to the denominator or to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. So what do I have on the bottom right now? 4x is correct. Because, like we said, 2/3 plus 1/3 makes 3/3, which would just make x. And then, but on the top, in order to add these together, we need to get common denominator. So we're adding 1/2 and 1/3 together. So what's going to be the common denominator? 6. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of do this to the side right here. So if I have 1/2 plus 1/3, I end up wanting to get a denominator of 6. Okay, so what would I multiply 2 by in order to make it 6? 3. And so I multiply 1 times 3, which is 3. And 3 I'd multiply by what? 2. And then 1 times 2 is 2. So we add, and 3 plus 2 makes 5. And we keep the denominator 6. So over here on the top, I have, what will I write? What goes on the top? Good, 5x to the 5/6 power. Okay, so we simplified. Okay, so now what is my domain on this one? So you just need to think about, is this an even or an odd root? Very good. It is all non-negative real numbers. You could also write all positive real numbers if you wanted to. That means the same thing. You'll see it written both ways, but like with the real number thing, you could put the all non-negative and you could just do real numbers like that if you want to. Yeah. Can you wait till after notes? We're almost done. All right. Okay, so the next part we're talking about is compositions. Focus, please. Okay, with compositions, in fact, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and stop here and then restart. Hold on.